we hope that people have fun with it and think of other books they want to read together. But I think this is a great one to get started with. Um, I should probably introduce Ray, who is the head honcho for AMTA, and let him say a few words before we get started. And he can, and then he can be one of those just plain folks.
So I guess most of you already picked it up from the book. I mean, it is amazing how much work folks have been doing to kind of legitimize, to validate what model AMTA has been about, what modeling instruction has been about for decades now. Um, and the information just keeps pouring in, supporting what AMTA and modeling instruction has been about, and what anybody that's experienced a modeling workshop knows, right? Real learning, right? And it is something to experience, and the human brain, right, experiences it in such a rich way. I, and I'll just end by saying I did reach out to the author in hopes that he will speak to us at our conference this summer. I don't know that he'll do it, but we figured why not, right?
Why not?
Uh,
And if you don't ask, the answer is always going to be no, right?
always no, right? And we'll have other folks, waiting in the wings, but we figure we'll start at the top with the hot author.
I know.
And thanks for coming. Yeah, I think this is a great conversation to have. So great idea. I'm so glad this is happening.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I would love to know, raise your hand if you read all the way through part one, if you made it all the way through. I don't expect that everybody has made it all the way through, but most of us have. Okay, cool. So now, how many have gone further? Because once you're started, it's hard to stop, I think. Anybody finish part two? Okay, anybody finish the whole book? Okay, several of us have finished the whole book. Now, my challenge to you, those of you who have read past part one, is that when we get into breakout rooms, try not to ruin the surprise or whatever. I mean, don't try not to foreshadow what's coming, keep it keep it on that beginning, what is learning really, which is what we're going to be talking about today, because we want it to be, we want everybody to get their aha moments as they're reading, but you will have a little extra perspective, and you might actually give us some ideas at the end of the hour about next time questions, or maybe things that we want to keep in the back of our mind while we're reading part two. So with that, the way I think it's going to go tonight is we're going to do some breakout rooms, because it's hard to, I was a little worried because there's 30 people signed up for this. And I thought, holy crap, how am I going to have a really good conversation with 30 people? Let's do breakout rooms. And so we will break out in a couple of minutes, and we will, I've got a prompt for you to talk about, and a Jamboard for you to write on. And then we'll come back and share thoughts. And then we're gonna, after we hear the brilliant ideas of those people in the other groups, we'll break out again and see if there's anything we want to add to our own brilliant ideas that we had. But before we go, I'd like to ask you two questions, to just framing questions first. And this is my favorite. Any of you who have been in a workshop with me know this. What is a model? Just open your mic and sing out. Don't be shy. And don't look it up.
I'll say
I-
it,
Okay,
I-
Jeff, go for it.
it's a framework for thinking about a problem or a situation or a class of phenomena. It's a mental framework for thinking about whatever it is you need to think about.
Okay, all right, excellent. What else?
I think of a model as some kind of representation of a phenomenon or something that you can observe. And the phenomenon does not have to be directly observable. And then it's a tool for thinking and reasoning and making predictions about that phenomenon.
Okay, excellent.
I would describe a model as a kind of a set of representations that capture or depict in another way the features of a situation that you deem most relevant.
Yeah, the things we need to pay attention to, right? Cool, cool.
I would say
what else?
examples of a model could include an equation, it could include a graph, a picture, a table.
Okay, all those different representations.
I also am remembering from the presentation last winter, and now my brain is drawing a blank. So Cynthia Passmore,
Uh-huh.
she made that presentation, and she kept asking what is a model of, but a model for. It has
Yeah.
to have a reason for existing, a utility. It's taking you somewhere.
Yeah, model of and model for, those are two really important distinctions that are made in the cognitive science literature. I would argue that when you're talking about children, really young children, infants even, who are building models all the time, some are just models of, but then, you know, if they don't have a use for it, you know, if it doesn't become a model for, I think maybe it might evaporate. I think that happens with a lot of, you know, what happens in class, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
say
Mark just
that's
read a
what
great
happens in
article
my-
about the model of, model for framework in science education. Oh, was it a Passmore article, Marta?
No, it was not. I'm pulling it up. Passmore was one of the authors. She was
Yeah,
the
not
second
surprising.
author.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it could be one of her grad students. Yeah, that's a model of, model for has been around in math ed research for a really long time. And it started becoming a thing in science ed research, not surprisingly, when NGSS really brought models to the forefront of thinking and learning in science. Okay, we got a lot of great definitions of what is a model, and I think we're all kind of on the same page. And when you put them all together, they're a really, you know, thick description of what a model is. How about learning? What is learning? Oh, Brenda, your mic is off. If you're talking to us.
That
If you're not
I
talking to
would
us.
it would right now I would have a hard time not quoting something from the book because it
Yes.
resonated so strongly with me, in agreement with how I already thought. In fact, so much so I got this at the beginning of last summer.
Mhm.
There were two quotes that went on my whiteboard at my Chem 1 workshop last summer because it just seemed to capture something I thought we needed to pay attention to. And I don't know if I'll be jumping the gun by
No, just go
quoting
ahead and
them.
jump it. Go ahead and jump it. We all read
Okay,
that
so
part.
in the introduction on 26 of the introduction, to learn is to progressively form an internal model of the outside world. And that captures so much. And then as we get into the first actual chapter, this is more about intelligence, but the act of intelligence is to learn and make sense of. So at its core, intelligence can be viewed as a process that converts unstructured information into useful and actionable knowledge.
Yeah,
And that was useful and actionable. That was just like, if we can't do something with it, what's the point? It will go
Right.
away.
right. Why bother? You know, space is limited, especially the older we get, right? Cool. What else? What is learning?
I was gonna say, like, taking in information and adapting it to fit what you know, or fit it into a new, like, change your model or change your idea.
Mhm.
So I thought that kind of was in the book as well. I
Yeah.
wanted to quote everything.
Excellent. Anything else we want to throw out
So-
there to like just frame our thinking and talking when we get into our little rooms?
So a couple of years ago, I ran across Bloom's taxonomy for the first time. And that certainly spoke to me because I have students who are only at the memorization, the very lowest level kind of thing. And so, you know, sophisticated learning is building a model. And the most basic stuff that we're trying to get our kids past is just accumulating facts that maybe you could later use as input to a model. But I'm struggling with students who just can't get past that first stage of just memorizing.
Well, you know, they're also playing the school game, right? You know, and memorization was a way to ace the school game for probably years for a lot of kids.
And
So,
it still is in many courses for kids.
yeah, yeah. I don't know, it only gets you so far.
And I think
Yes.
just to build on Jeff's point, raising Bloom's taxonomy and how that can lead to different views of what counts as learning, what counts as knowledge. I actually think learning, or I really struggle these days to define learning and knowledge. Like the way we're talking about it is very, very much rooted in a Eurocentric view of knowledge and what counts as knowledge.
Mhm.
And like I've done a little bit of reading some stuff on indigenous epistemologies, and there's a lot of Native American tribes in the US that understand what knowledge is in some really different ways that has really important implications for then what learning looks like. The author definitely seems to be leaning into that Eurocentric view of what counts as knowledge, and it's certainly a useful view of what counts as knowledge. And there's a lot of things we can understand about how kids learn from that view. So I definitely don't want to discount it. I guess I'm just naming, I'm in a place where I see that as one kind of knowledge, and I've been trying to figure out how do I sort of expand my view of what counts as knowledge and learning.
Cool.
Well,
Well,
that's interesting because at some point he makes this point about like different language sounds that if they don't exist in your language, your brain never builds the connections to make them. So, I mean, you could sort of extend that to what learning is. And there could be different entirely ideas about learning. And if you are raised in a culture where, you know, this is learning, you won't have the structures for what this other culture says is learning.
Yeah, when I read that piece, I was thinking of I'm in a grad program and I took a course, I think last year, from a faculty member that specializes in Ojibwe language. And as she talked with us about how as she's been learning the language, she finds that when she's speaking Ojibwe, she thinks in some ways that are very dramatically different than when she's speaking or writing in English.
Interesting, really interesting. If you've got, you know, interesting papers to share, I would say let's put them in a shared folder and, you know, because some of us might want to read, you know, stuff that's related. I put a couple, I made a folder and put a couple things in it that are just, you know, suggestions for if you're feeling like diving down the rabbit hole for some of these things. And if you've got ideas, please throw them in there. I'll share the folder with you at the end of the hour. Okay, shall we have a couple small group discussions? I'm thinking there are 10, well, so there are 10 of you, and then there's me. And what I'm going to do, if this is okay with you, is divide you into two groups, make a couple breakout rooms, divide you into two groups, and I've made this series of Jamboards, and we're just going to use the first two of them. But on that series of Jamboards, I have put the 7 ways of thinking about learning that he articulates in this first section. And I would like your group to pick a couple. I think of, you know, his 7 perspectives as like there's a house and it's got 7 windows and we're all looking in one of those windows and we see it a certain way. So there's going to be some way that resonates for you, or maybe a couple of ways that resonate. But I think we can, you know, we can put these together, you know, and enhance our thinking about what is learning. But what I would love for you to do is to, you know, take a look, I'm gonna put the Jamboard, I'm gonna do that right now before I forget. Put the Jamboard link into the chat. Come on. And there. And if you're in room 1, use Jamboard 1, and if you're in room 2, use Jamboard 2, and talk about what is learning from, you know, a perspective or two, and maybe put some things on your Jamboard that will help you remember how you thought about this or interesting insights that you had. And then we will come back to the whole group in about 15 minutes and listen to each other's thinking. How does that sound? Well, okay. All right, I'm gonna open the rooms and I am gonna plan to bring you back here at 33 minutes after the hour, according to my computer. That's 15 minutes. So any questions before we go? All right, the rooms are open.
Hello.
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 Beth, how are you?
Doing great.
All right. All right. Marta, I want to chat with you later about the cultural aspects of learning. I find parts of that fascinating. I just want to say, real quick before we start, the most fascinating part for me is the way we, I'll say, judge the learning and the way that we rank learning culturally, right? I mean, I think that could be a whole lifetime of conversation, right? But the most simplest one that we deal with is students and teachers, right? The context of those two cultures are completely different, right? What they consider learning. But anyway,
But yeah, Megan Bang is a great place to start for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nicholas, by the way, you had I loved your definition. Very inclusive. Wow.
Thank you.
I almost find it funny that one of them is learning is minimizing errors, because I feel like I want my kids to make mistakes so that they learn.
Well, that makes sense, right? Because if the learning process is minimizing errors, if you're not making errors, you can't be minimizing them, which means you can't be learning.
Oh, I like that.
Or hopefully you're learning from your mistakes and then you're not making it again.
That is true.
Or
Hopefully.
even if you are, I mean, one of the big things I've had to get used to in the last couple of years that it unfortunately took me 20 years to get to this point, is that when my students don't remember something or don't understand some fundamental thing that they should have understood 2 months ago, it just, those links haven't been made in their brain yet. Just need to repeat it again, give them more data, give them more experience, vary practice, and we'll get there.
More experience. I like that you said that.
All right, I'm gonna put that on the sticky note on the Jamboard.
Yeah, well, and just a kind of a different take on that. You know, you have a lot of research showing that if those alternate conceptions aren't confronted, right? That they somehow linger,
Yeah.
right? That lots of students will learn to say what they think they're supposed to say in the classroom, but yet that misconception, when they walk out of that classroom, it's still there, and that's how they will really continue to function in the world.
Yeah, and there's some interesting stuff that you have to be really careful about how you confront it. Because if, like, I as a teacher walk into a physics classroom and just say, you know what, you're all wrong when
Yeah.
you say that heavier objects fall
Yeah.
faster than light objects. If we can get rid of air resistance, they're all going to fall at the same rate. So you all need to just stop being wrong. That really confrontational approach is actually going to get kids to dig in their heels and cling more tightly to those alternate conceptions. But if you can set up situations where the kids are the one that are
experience it,
being
right?
the ones to actually challenge that,
Yeah.
and set up situations where you can validate, like, all right, here's what reasonable thinking led you to that alternate conception, but here's the limitations of that. That's when kids start to actually believe something new.
Mm.
They're empowered, right?
Mhm.
Empowered.
Doing this process of their brain is making a hypothesis, they're testing it, and they're seeing, okay, it doesn't quite work, and they're making these small adjustments. And
Mhm.
What did you think about, it says learning is optimizing the reward function. And then it talked about points and grades and I don't know, when you read that, I mean, because some students could care less, right?
well, that was a teaser on his part, right? He said, I'll talk about that later. So I was like, when can I get to later?
Yeah, that's something I've actually been, even before I started this book, been doing kind of a deep dive on grading and motivation. My role is I work in the district office as a content specialist, and we got voluntold to run a task force to fix grading in our district. And that conception that kids need that extrinsic motivation of points and grades is really strong and really really strongly reflected in the things we're seeing and hearing from teachers. But also when you look at the literature, that actually has really limited impact on students' intrinsic motivation. And there's a lot of issues with relying too heavily on that extrinsic motivation of points and grades.
Well, because the points and grades, ultimately, the way we typically do it, don't have any meaning in terms of actual constructive feedback for minimizing that error function and for this process that they naturally want to do because it's built into them, right? So figuring out a way to make any kind of feedback that we give them, any assessment we give them, directly tied to something they can do with it.
Yeah, that's the argument, right, for standards-based grading.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, big argument, as you guys, I'm sure, are aware, against the grading system. And I think he's kind of getting at exactly what Nick is saying. I think that's exactly where he's going. Like, there's no real value in learning to the grading system. What does that A mean? It can mean 1,000 different things, as a B can mean 1,000 different things, right? But what actually ends up happening is those kids that get the A's, right, they start thinking they're smart. And when they aren't successful, they blame whoever it is out there because they're smart, so it couldn't be them, right? It's got to be something wrong with everybody else. And then the kids that aren't being successful, right? Right, they just check out, right? They're like, this isn't for me, and they just check out. So, like, right there, you just took, a big percentage of your student body and just alienated really anything that you could do with them in terms of real learning. So,
Yeah.
I think
So
that's
this year has been an experimental year for us. I've essentially discarded any kind of point keeping or standards or anything. And everything is feedback and then student reflections, and we negotiate a grade. And there's some equity issues with that because of students' differing ability to negotiate and think critically about what they're doing, that we're trying to work through. but I do find that it has very positive impact in terms of every student at this point in the year is engaged in the process and moving forward and addressing their weaknesses. So I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of, I obviously kind of related to modeling, and I look at it and say, a very practical example, kids they're learning projectile motion. If they learn how to predict, if they're rolling this ball down the ramp, where it's going to hit on the target. And when those kids make their adjustments and get it right, it's a very real reward experience that they get. There's dopamine firing off in their brain, and they enjoy it, and they connect it to the strategies they used, right, and the effort they put in, all those things. Real learning, right? When a kid gets an A on the paper or the report, it's really more of an ego thing, right? It's this general kind of I'm an A, It's not really connected to specific things that they did and strategies that they implemented. Yeah, so I think
And
One of the things,
I just want to point out, if anybody wants to edit one of my sticky notes or add anything,
You're doing a good job.
you're doing a great job.
one of the things I always think about when the idea of rewards and learning and grades, all of those things that are entangled come up, is so much of how we think about the role of rewards was shaped by the work of people like Skinner and Thorndike, who they didn't study learning in children or in people. They study, Skinner was sticking pigeons in boxes and giving them food. Thorndike was sticking cats in puzzle boxes and watching them escape. And so we know that, and we know that every model has cases where it's useful and cases where it starts to break down and limitations. And I think when you're using a model of learning that's initially rooted on cats escaping from boxes, and you're starting to talk about children learning science, you have to use a lot of caution in how you apply that model.
yeah,
Agreed.
I'm glad we put notes on our Jamboard.
Thanks for doing that, Beth.
Yes.
No
Yeah,
problem.
thank you, bro.
Hopefully no one's still trying to apply behaviorism to education. I don't know.
In my learning theories class, we said a lot, we love to quote Dewey and Piaget, but you look at what we do and there's a lot of Skinner and Thorndike.
Well, you were talking about reflection. Like, that's something I need to improve on myself, and I need to get my students to do more of. But I jumped in this year trying standards-based grading with my AP Chem kids, just to, totally don't know what I'm doing. It's good. It's good.
How were the students liking it?
They seem to be okay, although for I was giving them quizzes and then a test on the unit, and then I would take the quiz grades out and just put the test grade in. And they were like, what are we doing? So I just stopped doing the quiz grades. I tell them they're pointless quizzes, and I grade them and give them back. But I'm like, your goal is to do better on the end of the unit assessment. But then for each test, I have like 7 standards or 9 standards, or like, so each test gets like 9 grades. So it's good to try in a class with only 11 kids.
Oh, okay. That was my next question. How many students?
Yeah. So right now I was like, I'm going to start small and figure out what I'm doing before I get too crazy. But there's gotta
Standards-based
be a better
doesn't,
way.
it doesn't take more time than points grading if you're willing to take the plunge and stop counting points. You just can't do both.
Right.
Yeah. And are they meeting making it more a rubric and not having yeah.
One of the moment that really sold me on standards-based grading, I was interviewing some kids for my dissertation research, and I asked them if they thought that I, as their teacher, believed they were good at physics. And when I sat down to analyze those responses, I realized every single girl I interviewed, and most of the boys, said yes because of the quizzes where I got a bad score.
Wow.
They interpreted my feedback and the built-in retakes as evidence that I believed they could improve and that they could master it. And so they took this. I was super proud when I realized that that was
Yeah.
showing up in my data, and
That's
it
amazing.
was so cool.
Yeah. I do like the ability because kids like the retakes, like kids
Mhm.
start taking like the first quiz more seriously, like so they
Mhm.
don't have to do it again. Yeah.
And if they know they're going to get meaningful feedback too, then that helps.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Cool.
just to give Marta a plug, she's gonna do she's gonna do a research on her webinar. She's gonna do a webinar on her research. What's your top, why girls think they're not
Why
so good at-
girls don't think they're good at physics.
There you go.
Or why don't girls think they're good at physics? I
Yeah.
should know. It's the title of my dissertation, and I'm defending in about 2 months, so I should know this.
That's going to be an important piece of research right there.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. I agree.
I'm putting that as a sticky note. Meaningful.
Yeah, we had a thing a few years ago when we were given the question of investigating, why don't girls have high self-efficacy in STEM, right? And then we boiled it down, looked at the actual numbers, and it wasn't true. It was only in physics.
Mm. Mhm.
So
That's really common. And then when you start digging, it turns out there's a lot of cultural and environmental factors that are pretty unique to physics that make it harder for girls to develop a high sense of self-efficacy, especially Black girls and Latina girls.
Wow. Huh.
2-minute warning.
Chris,
Right.
Chris, did you have anything that you wanted to add to our board here?
So I've read this book before, and this is the second time I've gone through it. I actually work with Nicholas, so we work side by side at Greenhill School. I actually have similar observations that has been shared here. The students are actually very they love the feedback. They seem very grateful for it. There is a belief that is communicated in the fact that you would write out full thoughts and full statements. One of the ideas of the books that we've been thinking is that daily short quizzes, daily short assessments are so important, because they give that feedback and they create a relationship that really is that you don't get anywhere else, even in modeling. Like our discussions build relationships, but the feedback is a little bit more generalized. But when you give specific feedback to a specific student, it in a way that is the connection, that is the relationship. And that's my feeling about it.
Yeah, it's really personalized. So I think that's the way we're going.
I would be interested if anyone has thoughts on this. Learning is exploring the space of possibilities. When I read that was interesting to me. I think the big point there was this idea of introducing randomness so as not to get stuck.
Yes.
I was very curious about it.
Well, there's the aspect to me that I found interesting was the motivation part of it, the engagement part of it, because the exploration happens when, there's that curiosity, right? When it's an innate curiosity and an innate motivation. And from my early days in teaching, that's something I've always kind of wondered about. We've spent so much time in education, with the bookkeeping.
Anyway.
Okay, I know, you're just getting started, right? It's so hard to get pulled back, but hopefully we will get another chance to go into our rooms for a minute. But I would just love to ask you about some of these sticky notes. And one that really jumped out to me, don't ask me why, is what does this tell us about our students and their phones on Jamboard number 1? Could you say more?
Well, their phones reward them. Their phones reward them with little dopamine hits. You know, every time a friend of theirs likes something they post, right? Or it penalizes them with whatever the other hit is when one of their friends says something unpleasant about them on social media. And so they're very much engaged with their phones. And I was sorry to repeat for my breakout group. In our school, I'm allowed to forbid phones in the classroom.
Mhm.
So I do,
Hmm.
but I can't forbid them in the hallway. And so the students are engaged with their phones right up until they walk into the classroom and then spend the next 10 minutes task switching. I mean, not all of my students, but the ones that I don't have this problem with, I'm not concerned about those students,
Mhm.
right? But so you lose them for the first 10 minutes. I was talking to my wife this evening at dinner about a dead fish handshake. I have this one classroom of students, and teaching them is like a dead fish handshake.
Huh, huh. Okay, but what does this have to do with learning?
Well, their phones teach them to spend more time on the phone.
So does that mean we have to give them constant feedback, more feedback in lots of different ways?
We certainly have to provide something in the classroom that is at least as engaging as their phone, and if not more. Right, we had a book group last year with the building thinking classrooms. So all my whiteboards are vertical this year. All my students are standing for any class in which we're doing whiteboarding, which is as many of them as I can manage. And aside from the dead fish handshake class, this has completely transformed. I've had to tell my students at the end of the last period on a Friday that class is over, it's time to stop and go home. I've had to do that
Wow.
more than once, which is, you know, ridiculous that you have to do this in a high school. But it really, so there are things that really do engage the students that do compete with their phones, but not for every student.
Mm-mm. Nope. Just moved the seat today of one who was not staying off his phone.
Uh-huh.
He's right next to my desk.
Yeah.
Right, but so you don't have. I can forbid the phones, right?
Hmm.
And I can give them our equivalent of a detention if they have their phone out. You know, mostly I just take their phone for the duration of the class because I don't want them to hate me. But you know, I in a Catholic school, you have leverage that you don't necessarily have in a public school, and I need every lever I can get.
Yeah. Yeah.
So back in the pre-phone days, I will say, there was always this competition, right, for student attention and learning, right? We would say, you know, students are going to learn something. It's just a matter of whether they're going to learn what we want them to learn or not, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's just that the phones now are so good at distracting the students. They are, you know, distraction on steroids, right? So the other piece of that, though, was in the traditional classroom, a lot of times you wouldn't know if the kids were paying attention or not. You know, I think, you know, the idea of you know, the modeling classroom is, right, you draw that out. If they're not engaged, you're engaged and you know whether they're learning or not.
Mhm.
I hadn't thought about that way. Because if they're not going to be engaged, they're going to be on their phone. It's a good signal. You know when they're not engaged because you see their
No, right.
phones.
It is telling you something. All right.
And I think it's worth naming that this is not something specific to teenagers. Like I'll own that as a full-grown adult, I've learned if I'm going to have deep focus on something at work or when I'm trying to get some writing done, I have an easier time if I take my phone out of my pocket and set it out of reach on do not disturb. So they're good at drawing everybody in.
They are.
Yeah, man. Maybe we could learn something from them.
Mhm.
There's a study that was done on that, right? That they compared the ability to attend and therefore perform on a test based on the proximity of your phone. Not
Oh,
just
really? I had not
Right.
heard about that study. How
even
interesting.
like the difference between in your backpack and out of the room actually was tangible.
Hmm.
Oh.
Hmm.
Wow.
So is it a bad thing that AMTA has grants to help develop tools that that are free smartphone data collection apps? Are we doing something, inherently destructive to the learning environment by helping to develop these tools?
I
Maybe the
have my
kids.
phone, my students use their phones as stopwatch. I have my students use their phones to use the inclinometer function in the physics toolbox. I
Yeah,
mean, they have their uses. But then I make them put them away.
yeah, yeah. What else? What else jumped out to you? Look at these two boards and see if you see a note that you want to ask somebody about.
I would like to add something to what Nicholas's study said. The mental patterns that you go through when your phone is taken away from you, because you have dopamine relationship with your phone, it's like a loved one. And neurobiologically, your brain behaves when your phone is taken away as if when you cannot see your loved one anymore. And it's a deep distress that
Sure.
that we're causing. And so, yeah, it's more than taking away an addictive device. It's taking away a relationship they have with a device. And so it's something that strategically, we all have to manage. And there's big consequences for trying to like rip phones away.
So, and that has implications, right? I mean, that actually could, if you're causing trauma by taking the phone away, you can actually impede learning.
How interesting.
I was just with the comment about, the further away it is, the better kids doing a test. And I'm thinking, okay, I have 2-person desks here, and I send half the kids at all the desks into the lab stations so that there's only one person. And at the lab stations, there's whiteboards between kids, but I have the phone sitting on the opposite side of the table from them. They can see it, but they know they can't reach
Can't
for it
touch
because I'll
it.
see it. It's better than in a backpack because I know where their phone is and they know where their phone is and their smartwatch and everything else. But maybe having it present, but just we all agree it's over there. You can still see it. You're not being separated from it, but I know it's not in your pockets where you're, texting under the table to the next class. What that nasty free response question was. Or looking something up. Anyway, just a thought. But the role of distraction in learning, I think, is really what we're looking at here. Is if we are getting kids into some of these learning modes and they're getting reward feedback for what they're learning and how they feel about it, isn't that really some of what we are trying to do that helps propel them into other experiences of learning? I know I watch when kids discover their power as a learner. I had a kid last semester that was real at first, still like he's going to be an okay kid in my class. He seems reasonably engaged, and then something happened and collapsed. And then he started trying to pull out of on his way to failing grade. And something happened that he experienced the aha for the first time in a long time, serious aha. And we talked about it, and we devised a way for him to make sure he had the right aha. And that was in the last semester. And he went from, I don't know if he's going to make it, to like getting a B on my final.
Yeah.
And this semester he's back and ready to go because he wants to feel that sense of competency. I could tell that's what drove him. So I keep rewarding, that was a good insight, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
You're
He
really
knows what to
thinking
pay
the change.
attention to, right?
Yeah. And he gets the reward, the dopamine reward that
Right.
apparently was missing before.
So you're
Man, that's what we
outcompeting
need.
his
We need
phone. That's a win.
dopamine. We need little dopamine, like spray canisters or something. I don't know. There's no shortcut. to helping learning happen. But
Yeah,
I
and
think
we
we
had-
have to just be clever, right? In designing our learning environment.
We talked a little bit about the idea of self-efficacy and whether a kid can see themselves as the kind of person who gets an A. And I see some connections between that and what Brenda was just talking about. If you have a kid who, for whatever reason, and there's loads of reasons, many of them very, very much steeped in our culture for why a kid might not expect to be successful in a physics class or a science class in general, and might not expect to have those moments where they get to feel competence, then why should they try? Why should they put in effort if they've been set up to believe that they won't get those rewards?
Or worse, that they get the negative feedback that says you aren't good enough. Here's proof. You know, I'd rather not do the work and get the F than do the work and have it prove me that I can't do it.
Right. Because errors are king, you know?
Yep.
It's like X, 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 X on our papers. Or minus points or whatever it is we see when we see a paper that's returned to us.
Well, I'll just say for me, personally, when I shifted from traditional to modeling instruction, one of the big shifts was, that interaction in the classroom, right? There was a real disconnect, right, between what the students were thinking and what we were hoping that they were thinking. Let's put it that way. And when you start with a discussion that is based in their representations and their thinking, you're starting from a place of engagement, right? And those students experience personally real learning, right? And I think there's no substitute for that, right? A kid getting questions right on a test because they're saying what someone else wants them to say is very different from a kid experiencing something, saying what they really kind of think about it, and then growing their understanding. Like that is, when you talk about dopamine, right? That's palpable. Like you can feel that in a classroom, right? It's not that artificial right or wrong on a test question. And to me, that's what we're talking about here. That's the learning.
Yeah, good question, Ellen. How do you promote learning through modeling and still grade? That's another really long conversation, I think, and maybe we will have that conversation over the next 3 sessions, but we're fast running out of time, and I wanted to give you a moment or two in your breakout rooms one more time to think about, as we start reading part 2, are there things that we want to pay attention to? Do we have lingering questions now? Is there something about what we've seen in this first part that makes us want to, hope to see something or look for something as we begin reading ahead? So I would like to send you back to your rooms for about 4 or 5 minutes. I'm going to open up the room, same folks. If you want to add to your board or add some burning questions to your board, go for it. But just a quick check-in with our room buddies.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
Hello again.
So largely just because of where I'm at in my job, kind of the 2 big things I'm going to be really thinking about going forward is continuing to think about implications for grading and especially relationship between grading and motivation. Other big thing I'm spending a lot of time on at work is supporting science teachers in shifting to some standards based on NGSS. And so I'm doing a lot of trying to push these teachers who've been very, very good at very teacher-centered, very heavy on direct instruction into a new direction. And so I'm partly thinking about adult learning and how do I support the teachers I'm working with in learning a different way to teach and navigating that discomfort.
One thing, having read the whole book, and before I learned of this book group, I had read the whole book, that I want to just suggest everyone think about, because he's going to address this, is he's going to take at one point this whole distinction between like student-centered and direct instruction, and he's going to say basically completely break the dichotomy. So look for that, because I think it's a great conversation. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's definitely much, much less binary than it typically gets talked about.
Yeah, I guess for me, what I am really looking forward to me, I see this juxtaposition between this exploring the space of possibilities and restricting the search space, right? Like, I think, like, how do you do both? You know, like, and I know it happens, right? And it does happen. And there's kind of, I think each of us make decisions about which of those our brain is kind of engaged with. But I'm looking forward to that. So don't give me the answer, Nicholas. I'm looking forward to kind of exploring that.
Yeah. And like, even like just the first part was more like explaining how machines are trying to learn and how they don't work as well as we do. So now like the second part is, how do our brains work? So I'm fascinated to, kind of move in that direction. Now they've got me hooked with the AI. I was like actually like fascinated with, because usually I'm not very philosophical about these things, but this has been a fascinating book to read. So
now he's talking about 2020 AI, and there were some things he said he can't do. That's like, well, yeah, it can.
Yeah.
Yes.
oh, so even within the past 4 years, it's changed.
Yes. Yes.
I think what excites me about kind of this group and the journey through the group is taking a modeling classroom environment and those dynamics and focusing in on what is happening in an individual student's brain and trying to optimize the environment I'm able to provide that student from that perspective within the modeling realm. And so, there's some suggestions that he makes, and I'd be very interested to see kind of the reflections from other very experienced modeling teachers on how to implement maybe some of those some of those suggestions.
So to me, I guess, Christopher, I mean, the first thing I think of is the thing that happens in the modeling classroom is, and maybe this is oversimplifying, but the representations on whiteboards is revealing students' thinking, right? So I think we have at least a framework in which,
And we are back. I love it that everybody stayed in their rooms to the very last second, because there might be some just pearls of wisdom going on. That's awesome. While I'm thinking about it, I'm going to put in the chat the folder where we can share readings and things. And our Jamboards are in there too, in case we want to look back on our Jamboards. So final nuggets for us to think about, keep in mind, and maybe offer a framework to help us pay attention to important stuff while we read the next section.
I don't think we wrote it down on our thing, but we were talking about how grading and motivating and standards-based, like how we can use that and how we can move forward in that direction.
Yeah. Motivation is another huge topic that is so interesting that we can talk about. I might throw a motivation reading in that folder, because I know a lot of them. I used to have one of the guys on my thesis committee, his specialty was motivation in cognition, and yeah, lots of interesting stuff. What else? Other pearls of wisdom.
In our group, just as we were finishing up, Brenda said something and I just had to write it down. I thought it was so key. We have to teach students how to collaborate with their own brains.
Oh.
I thought that was great. So
Yeah.
I've written that one down.
Here's a tool. Learn to use it, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's right here.
Yeah, no, it's so underutilized.
Yeah, well, And I've found so often how students actually undermine the very things that would make it easier to learn because they don't have a very good idea of what it is. You know, it could be framed in some ways as fixed versus growth mindset kind of factors, or only thinking of learning as memorizing, or only thinking of learning in this one capacity, or it just happens in my gut and I don't know why I remember it. And yet you can actively work with your mind to understand things better.
Well, do students even explicitly acknowledge the fact that learning is what they're there for?
They're
I
just in high school because it's like a prison sentence.
It's a warehouse.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah,
for some, yeah.
yeah. You know that.
I mean, there's
know.
literally stuff written in the early days of public school about what is the purpose of school, that states one of the purposes is warehousing children so that parents can go to work. So
Yes. Yeah.
it's not, I don't think it's necessarily obvious or something that you can assume that kids are there to learn. I think it's one of many purposes that school can serve.
Okay, we're all here together. Now they figured out we might as well learn something while we're all here together.
Yeah. Yeah. But you know, who brings that up
So,
in class to students that okay, learning, this is what we're here for. You know, what's learning? And I mean,
I
yeah.
I have found that has been maybe one of my primary roles in the classroom as someone who's about to step out, is that when I began to intentionally attempt to teach kids what learning is, how they go about doing
How to
it,
do it.
what is not effective, and so on, not just remembering, but learning. And I have an advantage at my school in that every single student's involved in music, and inherent is an understanding of learning for performance purposes that is quite different from how they treat classes most of the time.
Yeah.
So I can link into some of what a musician comes to understand needs to happen as a fellow musician. I've learned a lot about learning by learning an instrument and what the things I needed to do to really be good with that.
Yeah.
Not just skill-based, but to be a musician.
Right. Well,
And
that's a thing. That's a whole another thing, right?
yeah,
You know,
but
playing music and being a musician, there are, you know, those are different. They're on totally different levels.
so anyway.
Well, our time is up, but before we go, Sue is going to put a link into the chat for anyone who needs a certificate of attendance. So if you need a certificate that says that you attended this hour, you fill out this little form that that Sue is going to put the link into the chat for, and the certificate will magically appear in your mailbox within, I don't know, a week or so, right, Sue?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So this went by really quick. There's so much more to talk about, but I hope you're enjoying the book as much as I have enjoyed the book. You know, any good book, you know, any book worth reading is worth reading twice. So I'm reading it again along with you because there's more stuff. There's always more stuff. So I hope you enjoy part 2, and you've got some ideas to think about to help you know what to pay attention to. Or decide what to pay attention to. It's all good stuff, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Okie dokie. Well, we're officially done